Welcome back. Well, the 2022 midterm election is still not over, with a number of key races left to be determined. Now, we're still waiting to learn which party will control the House and which party will control the Senate. Natalie Brandt has more.
Counting the remaining ballots in Nevada could last into next week, as the Silver State's razor-thin Senate race is still a toss-up. Most of those votes are coming in from the Las Vegas area.
Mail can come through until this Saturday, as long as it's postmarked by November 8th. And we will continue to pick up mail on a daily basis.
Elections officials in Arizona are also still processing results. The Democratic incumbent is leading in that race, but it's still too early to call. In Georgia, Republican Senate candidate Herschel Walker has a rally scheduled for this evening. He and Democratic incumbent Raphael Warnock are campaigning once again ahead of their December 6th runoff election. The balance of power in the U.S. Senate is still unknown. Control of the U.S. House leans Republican, but it's much closer than predicted, with winners in some battleground districts still undetermined.
Regardless of what the final tally in these elections show, and there's still some counting going on, I'm prepared to work with my Republican colleagues.
President Biden also told reporters Wednesday he intends to run in 2024.
I don't feel in any hurry one way or another to make that judgment, today, tomorrow, or whenever, no matter what my predecessor does.
Former President Trump has hinted at an announcement next week, but allies say they're urging him to postpone it until after the Georgia Senate runoff. Natalie Brandt, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
Sources close to the former president tell CBS News that Trump is furious over the election results. A handful of candidates he backed in prominent races are projected to lose or are trailing in their bids for office. Trump posted on his Truth site that reports he is angry about the elections are possibly false. Well, while North Dakota Measure 2 that would have allowed the possession of recreational marijuana failed, close to 12 million people will have legal access to it in other states. In Maryland, voters approved for a constitutional amendment legalizing recreational marijuana for people 21 and older, and the approval of ending prohibitions on marijuana and allowing personal use for those over 21 was also passed in Missouri. Now, measures to legalize marijuana failed in North Dakota, South Dakota, as well as Arkansas.